Hello and welcome to Lightworks. In this tutorial we're going to have a look at some of the new EQ presets in the sound section of your effects palette. These presets can be used to remove any problems or just simply to enhance your sound further. Some of them target specific frequencies, but others will give you a great starting point when working with the soundtrack. Let's have a look at what's new. In the audio section you'll now find mains hum removal for 50Hz and 60Hz mains. Boost the treble, increase the presence of your voiceovers, lo-fi simulator, a loudness curve, low-end booster, microphone wind noise reduction, global mix-master EQ, plosive reduction, male and female sibilance reduction, and also reducing soundtrack presence for when you're dropping in voiceovers. Let's check out a couple of those in effect on my concert soundtrack mix here. First of all, the loudness curve. In the effects, we've written a short description of what you can expect from the EQ. The loudness curve, displayed on the EQ curve display here, gives a slight lift to the low end, a slight dip to the mid-range, and a slight lift to the high end. This effect is a bit like the loudness button on your hi-fi amplifier. What it means is that at low listening levels, this curve accounts for the frequency response of the human ear. It can also be a great way to warm up and add clarity to your mixes if you think they're sounding a bit dull and thin. Let's have a listen. Here's the soundtrack without the EQ. And now with the EQ. You can hear how the bass has got depth and presence, and the high end's crisper and clearer. And we pulled out a bit of the mid-range to smooth things out a little. Let's remove that effect and compare that with the similar Mix-Master EQ. The Mix-Master EQ is similar to the loudness. We raise the low end slightly. What we don't do is scoop out the mid-range. We raise the low end, pull out a little bit of the upper low end frequencies, and then we give a general lift from high mid-range right the way through the high frequencies. This EQ can be used to add a general warmth and clarity to your edit mixdowns. First of all, without the EQ, it's important to A/B the EQ on and off so you can actually hear what effect it's having and make any adjustments you need to. That's warmed up the bass nicely, given it some punch, and lifted those high frequencies. Let's just remove that. If you think your audio is lacking clarity, try boosting the treble. Here, only the upper mids and the high frequencies are lifted very slightly. I go to band 5, which is the only one turned on. It's just a couple of dB. Let's hear that in action. Turn it off first of all. So that's lifted the high frequencies. You don't have to use this as a boost. If you wish to, in this bottom field here, gain, you can turn it up more. Or you can actually use it as a high frequency cut. If you feel like your audio material is too harsh, have a go at using the treble filter to cut away some treble. And of course, you can adjust the frequency in this field here to taste as well, simply by sliding the slider or using the mouse wheel or using numeric entry. Let's have a look at the low end booster. On this filter we have quite a major boost in the low end spectrum, the lower mid range and the upper mid range, and it rolls away through the treble frequency at the top. Let's have a listen to that in action. First of all without. Now, depending on the type of speakers you're listening to, you may or may not hear that. If you've got a reasonable pair of headphones on, or are playing back through a decent hi-fi, you should have heard that low end start to thump a bit more. And again, as with the treble booster, do feel free to use it as a cut as well. If you feel like your mixes are sounding a bit too muddy, a bit too much bass at the bottom, try selecting the lower bands and reducing the decibel gain in these lower regions. The next effect I'd like to have a look at is to reduce the soundtrack presence. I'm going to drop this on in this middle section here. What I've got is a little voiceover here, some crossfades to crossfade the levels under the voiceover down slightly. What the soundtrack presence EQ can do for you is it scoops out the frequencies in the soundtrack that are related to the human voice. Otherwise, you could spend forever trying to balance the volumes, and it really doesn't work that way. Working with EQ is about making space for certain frequencies and scooping them out of other tracks. So let's just drop that on to our soundtrack, and you'll notice here there's one band turned on, and that's got a notch filter cut out around this area here. And this is to allow the human voice to sit into this section here. Otherwise we spend all day trying to balance the volumes, and that's not going to work out. So let's just take it from the top.
Born John Peter Wilkinson in July 1947, Wilko Johnson is an English singer, guitarist, songwriter and actor, particularly associated with the rhythm and blues band Dr. Feelgood from the 1970s.
Now if we just turn that off, you'll still hear the full frequency range of the background.
Born John Peter Wilkinson in July 1947, Wilko Johnson is an English singer, guitarist, songwriter and actor.
What's happening is the frequencies are fighting a bit, so we turn it back on. And now the VO can slot nicely into that frequency space we've made.
Born John Peter Wilkinson in July 1947, Wilko Johnson is an English singer, guitarist, songwriter and actor, particularly associated with the rhythm and blues band Dr. Feelgood from the 1970s.
If you'd like to increase the mid-range presence of your voiceover even further, we've got the increase voiceover presence EQ here. I drop that on, this gives a 2.5 dB lift just across the mids to upper mid and high range frequencies, just to push the voice a bit further in the mix. Let's have a listen to the impact of that.
Born John Peter Wilkinson in July 1947, Wilko Johnson is an English singer, guitarist, songwriter and actor, particularly associated with the rhythm and blues band Dr. Feelgood from the...
Do remember that you can access your individual track EQs on the tabs on the EQ section as well. So that's A1, A2 linked together on the soundtrack stereo group, and A3 is our voiceover. Of course, it has to be said, do remember, these are just starting points for you. You may need to back off on the gain, or slightly move the frequency values and Q. This Q value relates to the width of the curve. Low values here produce a wide curve, while higher values will produce a notch. If I increase this further and further, the notch becomes thinner. The general rule of EQ is to cut with a small range of frequencies and boost with a wide range of frequencies. Try and remember that. Also, it's another very good rule, if possible, is to use EQ cut rather than EQ boost. As we discussed earlier, try and make space for frequencies in your mix rather than continually boosting frequencies or trying to turn up volume levels. Think about what's important in your mix and where it needs to sit as far as the frequency spectrum is concerned. Okay, let's go on and check out a few of the other presets. In this section from the coffee dialogue exercise, we have a part in the section where somebody listening to the dialogue in the cafe has actually been recording our two subjects with a mobile voice recorder. That tracks down at the bottom here. What I've done is used the lo-fi EQ effect on her playing back the file from the voice recorder. Let's have a listen to that.
Oh, what is it? Forget about it. How's your coffee? Great. Did you know that Sue left Mark? Mark? Yeah. Wasn't she and Sean? Oh, that was ages ago. Where have you been?
So the curve on this EQ takes out a lot of bass and gives a boost in the mid-range to simulate a very small speaker. If we just turn it off from this last section, you can hear the difference.
That was ages ago. Where have you been?
So that's part of the material from the actual dialogue. I turn it back on.
That was ages ago. Where have you been?
Gives it that really tinny lo-fi effect. Experiment with that. It can be useful for all sorts of interesting effects. Next we're going to have a look at some mains hum removal. I've got 50 Hz and 60 Hz mains hum filters. It's possible you may have made a recording that includes a ground loop in your recording. Depending on what country you've done the recording in, these are either going to be 50 Hz mains or 60 Hz mains. First of all, let's have to listen to what the 50 Hz one sounds like. Again, you'll probably need speakers or earphones plugged in to hear it.
Like they're ever gonna give that part to Monica. Did you see her dress? Yeah.
They can hear it. And actually, it's this frequency here. I zoom in a little bit further. There's the 50 cycles per second wave that's embedded in our recording. Let's go straight to the 50 Hz mains hum removal. Drop that straight on. Here's the notch, down at 50 Hz, back to the top.
Like they're ever gonna give that part to Monica. Did you see her dress? Yeah. More like a birthday suit.
So that's gone completely. Next, I'd like to have a look at working with sibilants and plosive removal. When we talk about sibilants, I mean sounds like S and T and the harshness that they can give when you're doing voice recordings. For plosives, it sounds like P's and B's. There's a lot of acoustic energy in sibilants and plosives. We need to work out how to control that. First of all, let's take a look at sibilants. I've recorded a short sentence here. Sally sells seashells on the seashore. Sibilants, sibilants, sibilants. You can hear the power coming from the S's. For plosives, we've recorded another phrase with lots of P's in it. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. With the P's, we get lots of low frequency information. Let's have a look at trying to control those. First of all, sibilants. I'm going to take my male sibilance reduction and just drop that on the first section. We've got a little notch around 7K. Now for this one, you might need to do a bit of work. The way to find the offending sibilant frequency is as follows. If we go to a boost, and we're going to sweep the EQ frequency as we play back, we're listening for a ringing sound. That's going to be our problem sibilant frequency. Let's give it a go. Sally sells seashells on the seashore. Sibilants, 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 slightly sibilant. You can hear that ringing sound, and that's what we intend to cut. So I'm going to go with 7.6 kHz. I'm going to wind my dB cut back in and just replay that until I'm happy that things are balanced a bit better. Sally sells seashells on the seashore. Sibilants, 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 slightly sibilant. That's got it under control a bit better. Of course with EQ, the less EQ you can give, the more natural sounding the voice is going to sound. The human ear is very sensitive to EQ changes, so be careful here. So the same process we used to reduce the female sibilants. Let's jump over to this little section here for plosives. Okay, you found the plosive reduction filter here. I'm going to drop that straight on. Let's check it out. Turn it off first of all. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. There's a little bit of low-end information here I want to just remove. And again, we have to be careful. We don't want to remove too much to keep things sounding natural. Very, very deep bass and low end we can get away with as far as removing from the voice is concerned. When you have lots of bass in your mixes, it uses a lot of energy for it to be delivered. So you want to try and keep it under control. In the plosive reduction, it's a high-pass filter. It passes high frequencies from a certain point, which is around 100 Hz, upwards. So everything to the left, the deep bass below 100 Hz, is being cut pretty much completely. Once again, let's compare the two. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. Turn on the plosive reduction. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. That's much cleaner. That sub-bass is gone. Again, you need to experiment. Ideally, try and keep this figure as low as possible, but you need to adjust it to taste. And of course, you've also got the bandwidth, the Q value. If I change the bandwidth, you can see I can start rolling off from higher frequencies downwards. As you do so, you'll start to clearly hear the changes, as will your listeners, so be careful. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. In that case, we've lost too much bass. I want to keep that quite tight in the bass region. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. Finally, we've dropped in a filter to help you reduce wind noise in field recordings. It's this filter here. Have a listen to this recording. The wind's blowing and there's some really deep bass frequency information in there. Again, we can use a similar technique that we use when we reduce plosives on the wind. Let's drop that straight on. You notice again it's a high pass filter passing from approximately 180 Hz upwards. Let's wind that back. You can still hear the impact of the wind, and of course the best technique is to avoid it in the first place by using a foam wind filter on your field mic. But if you do get into a situation you need to control it, this filter will help you. There it is turned on. If I turn it off, you can hear that nasty rumble come back in. Again, experiment with the frequency, cut away as much as you can, but remember, the more you cut away, the thinner the rest of the recording will sound. So be careful and go easy. We hope the new EQ profiles are going to be helpful. Remember, they're a starting point and will require some adjustment, but with practice, you'll soon get it. Thanks for watching.